All right, folks, buckle up because this is one of those courtroom meltdowns that the mainstream media usually tiptoes around, but today we're diving straight into it. We're talking about the James Comey case, and apparently this entire thing just went off the rails inside the courtroom. You've got prosecutors whispering like high school kids caught cheating, a judge who looks like he's about to throw the whole file out the window, and a grand jury situation so messed up it sounds made up. So let's jump into this clip. Just before we do though, you know the content we serve here is second to none, so don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep more of this content coming. All right, with that out of the way, follow me as I break down every pause, every plot twist, and every meltdown.
Breaking news into CNN regarding former FBI Director James Comey and his fight to get his federal charges dismissed. Crime and Justice correspondent Caitlin Polans is right outside the federal courthouse. Caitlin, what happened in court?
Well, a startling discussion. Less than 1 minute of time passed with no silence in this courtroom as the judge was able to ask the question and got the Justice Department to admit the final indictment that James Comey now faces, the former FBI director. It was never shown to the full grand jury.
Hold up, what? The indictment wasn't shown to the full grand jury? It's like trying to cancel a guy because someone in the group chat said so. This is basic stuff. The government wants to prosecute a former FBI director but can't even do the kindergarten level step of letting the full grand jury see the indictment. And these are the same people who swear they're protecting democracy, right? Give me a break. This is exactly why people don't trust these institutions anymore. They can't even keep their own paperwork straight.
In this courthouse, and they did not approve it in full. They had voted down indicting Comey because they had been asked to approve 3 different charges against him. That indictment was a no from the grand jury, and then there was no further discussion with the prosecutors to bring about the indictment.
The grand jury literally said no, and the prosecutors basically went, well, anyway, and moved forward. Imagine your boss asks if you want overtime, and you flat out reject it, and then he still adds it to your timesheet. That's what this looks like. And the media wonders why people think some of these cases are politically motivated. If the jury says no, you don't get to hit Control-C, Control-V, and move forward anyway.
Now faces. I want to lay this out a little bit more because I'm sure there will be many legal analysts to talk about this. The judge didn't make any final determinations about the case, and there will be more arguments about this. But what happened in court was that Judge Nachmanoff, after there were many arguments about Donald Trump directing the Justice Department, whether Lindsay Halligan, the prosecutor here, had acted on her own accord to decide to bring this indictment against Comey, Judge Nachmanoff, he began asking the prosecutor to explain why the documents in this case looked the way this is, why there was missing time in the grand jury transcript, and things got very intense very quickly. They put on the husher. Both defense team and the prosecution team started whispering to each other very vigorously, and then the judge asked the question. The operative indictment in this case, that document was never shown to the entire grand jury. That is when Tyler Lemons, the prosecutor, standing next to Lindsay Halligan, the U.S. attorney who was also seated at a counsel table, says, standing in front of you right now, no. There was silence in the courtroom.
This right here is the moment everybody felt the temperature in the room drop. You know when someone gets caught in a lie and suddenly the whole table gets quiet? That's what happened. You've got a federal prosecutor admitting out loud that the full grand jury never saw the indictment. That's not a minor oopsie. That's a we might have just torpedoed our own case moment. Honestly, I wish there was video of this because the silence must have been chef's kiss.
Judge Nachmanoff sat back in his chair. He looked down. He flipped pages that were in front of them, and then he asked again and stopped Tyler Lemons from answering, called Lindsay Halligan up to the podium, and she also confirmed, no, Your Honor, that the foreperson in open court was the person who had signed the final indictment against Comey.
So we're now doing single-person indictments? Since when does one person get to act as the entire grand jury? What's next? Jury duty being replaced with a Google form? This just screams procedural disaster. You can't run a justice system like it's a group project where one person does all the work and everyone else doesn't even see what's being submitted.
This was the very end of the arguments, the full set of arguments. This was like an additional thing the judge wanted to talk about. And so right after this, the defense counsel for James Comey, Michael Dreeben, he stood up and he said, "It appears the operative indictment in this case was never shown to the grand jury and was never returned." That is the conclusion that they should draw, at least on the defense. He's trying to argue to the judge that this is an invalid case and should be outright dismissed. There's going to be more arguments in writing over this by today at 5. That was what the judge began to set up. But we are going to see how this plays out, because this is a bit of new information that was very unexpected today and really changes the entire tenor of our understanding of this case and the fight that James Comey's team can bring to it as they try to get it tossed out of this federal courthouse.
I mean, this is a big revelation, Caitlin. Have you ever heard of this happening before? I know we've covered DOJ grand juries for many, many years. I have never heard of a full grand jury not seeing a full indictment.
No, but I will say, Pam, the judge did tell both parties they needed to look up a particular case in a different district because something in that case law may shed light on how they should interpret this new information. But this was a moment in court. I've been in a lot of these hearings in politically charged cases over the years. This was gobsmacking. It was absolute silence. I've said before in this case that there have been moments where people gasped. But this was, you could see the entire room shift. And from then on, this was the only thing that was mattering in that case. This is the only thing that the judge and that others were talking about as they wrapped it up towards the end. I mean, one of the things, too, that was very surprising about this is how much this argument went back to Lindsay Halligan. We've never seen her speak at the podium before. And there was discussion. At one point, the judge even asked, is she a puppet? Is she a stalking horse of Donald Trump?
Ooh, now that's when you know things have gone off the rails. Judges don't casually throw out the word puppet unless they think something shady is happening. And of course, the media is foaming at the mouth, trying to frame the prosecutor as Trump's secret agent. Meanwhile, half the country thinks the DOJ is controlled by the DNC. Honestly, everyone just accuses everyone of being someone's puppet. It's like the world's worst episode of Sesame Street.
Just sent in to bring this case, and the prosecutors kept saying, no, she was making decisions on her own. She was even nodding very vigorously about that, sitting at the prosecution table. But then when she stood up to address the judge and confirmed what he then had on the record, that the full grand jury did not return this indictment, she seemed to be in quite an unhappy mood. She was very short with him.
I also think our viewers need to understand the background here for those that aren't following every step, right? Because President Trump put out that now infamous Truth Social post calling on the AG Pam Bondi to investigate Comey and Letitia James and Adam Schiff, and mentioned Lindsay Halligan as a potential replacement as the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District because the other one had left, didn't think that there was enough evidence to prosecute Comey. Lindsay Halligan steps in, right? And now this.
That's right. And Pam, what the bulk of the arguments was, the full 70 minutes before we got to this point about the discussion of the grand jury return, it was about Donald Trump's behavior toward Comey over many, many years. And not only did the defense bring up that tweet where Donald Trump tweeted to the Attorney General Pam Bondi saying you should charge James Comey, Letitia James, and Adam Schiff with crimes. It also went the whole way back, and the defense painted this picture of Donald Trump responding every time James Comey was publicly criticizing Trump as president, as the person who fired him, when Comey was writing his book. Each of those moments where Comey was speaking on the public stage critically of Trump, Trump was hitting back with some sort of public statement of his own, a tweet, a Truth Social post saying Comey should be facing some sort of consequences.
Look, Trump hitting back on social media isn't exactly groundbreaking news. That's like saying the sun rose this morning. Of course he hit back. Comey spent years blasting him publicly, and suddenly Comey's team acts shocked? Come on. If you poke Trump, he pokes back harder. That's the man's entire political personality. But pretending Trump complaining online equals automatic political prosecution, that's a stretch even for CNN.
So they're arguing that this prosecution, when it ultimately did come about, it was a choice made to deprive Comey of his First Amendment protections to criticize the president. Pam?
All right, Caitlin Polantz, thank you so much. A lot happening today out there.
Joining us now is the former federal prosecutor, Ankush Kaduri. He's also a senior writer for Politico magazine. Ankush, thanks so much for joining us. Always good to have you here in the Situation Room. Walk us through what we're expecting from today's hearing.
Well, look, the judge has a host of motions that he has set for a hearing this morning. And you could expect, I think, the focus of the questioning and the judge's interest today to be on the motion that Comey's lawyers have filed alleging that he is the victim of selective and vindictive prosecution at the hands of the Trump administration. Two slightly different arguments, but effectively that Comey was singled out as a result of animus on the part of the administration, and also that he's being treated differently from other similarly situated people, and he's being charged for something that other people wouldn't necessarily be charged with.
If the judge dismisses this case, Ankush, can the Trump administration pursue any other legal avenues against Comey?
So this is something of an open question, at least by the administration's reckoning. You would expect intuitively this case gets dismissed, the statute of limitations have already run. So you would think, okay, well, they may not have another avenue here. And I think that's probably right. However, there is a provision of law that the administration has cited that gives the Justice Department effectively another 6 months if an indictment has been dismissed for certain reasons. It is very, very unclear to me that that provision is meant to apply or should apply in a situation like this one, particularly if the other judge who has a hand in this case, who's handling the question of whether Lindsey Halligan was validly appointed, decides to dismiss the case on those grounds. So yes, there are some options available, but they will also be litigated if we get there.
During today's hearing, one of the prosecutors said Comey was indicted simply because he lied to Congress. Is that enough to fight Comey's push to dismiss this case?
It is not. I mean, look, the Comey's lawyers have produced reams of communications, public social media posts from Trump, all about how he dislikes Comey and how Comey ought to be charged. The government cannot just wave away all of that evidence. Now, I will say the standards for prevailing on a vindictive prosecution or selective prosecution defense are quite high. However, Comey has unusually strong facts. I mean, it is just not every day, or really any day, that you see a defendant walk into court with reams of sheets of paper being able to say the president has been targeting me for years. And by the way, this case was sort of jerry-rigged. They had to go get another fire the actual prosecutor, install a different prosecutor in order to get this over the finish line.
That is unbelievable. It's like they just got rid of the one dude, went to the next guy until he got the outcome they wanted. I mean, even former federal prosecutors are calling it jerry-rigged. That's not exactly a small accusation. That's basically saying, like, the case was built like a DIY shelf from Walmart, wobbly, missing screws, and probably collapsing in 5 minutes. Firing one prosecutor, replacing them with someone else, and magically getting the indictment you wanted. Yeah, if this happened to anyone but Comey, CNN would have a full-blown meltdown calling it corruption. But because it's Comey, suddenly it's complicated legal nuance. Sure.
These are unusually compelling facts.
And that, folks, is the courtroom meltdown. A prosecutor admitting the grand jury didn't see the indictment, a judge raising eyebrows so high they probably left the building, and a defense team basically saying this whole case is built on wet cardboard. Whether you like Comey or not, this was a disaster for the prosecution, no way around it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Was this incompetence, political revenge, or both? Hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this kind of breakdown, and I'll catch you in the next one.